Okay, I guess I am live, even though I have no idea what I'm doing here. Let's get rid of that. Let's look at screen. Okay. Okay. Whoa, that's a nice little effect. Okay, I'm Veronica Tash. You probably don't know me. I have very few followers on YouTube. First time using Twitch. Um, and right now I'm trying to get used to streaming. I do a little bit of educational and political content. Working to uh, get rid of my job. I'm currently working on a PhD in political theory at Wayne State University. And just as something easy we can go through, I figured I'd go through, take a few political tests. I've seen quite a few creators do this. And I'm small, probably no one is catching this live at all that is going to care where I stand on anything. But because it should be able to be saved, I should be able to, well, there'll be people in the future who will care where I stand. So this is something that's more of an investment and learning how the streaming worked. And you could tell I already messed up in the beginning. Oh, and by the way, you are going to notice I am a smoker. I don't normally smoke during the YouTube videos. Those are short blocks of time, and if I need one, I can stop in between. Since I'm streaming, I can't do that. But just because there may be some impressionable people who do watch this, I do want to stress I wish I hadn't started this. Um, it is just an extra need. If you think like the Sims video game, you have all those different need bars. This is adding an extra need bar, something I need to do. Cost me a bunch of money, but I can't quit because I have too much stress going on at once. And of course, when we're talking about that, uh, this right here, the nicotine acts like serotonin in your brain. It's the chemical that gives you happiness. And so your brain starts producing less serotonin when you smoke. And so that's bring you back down to regulate. Very when you first smoke, if you can actually get a little bit of a high off of the cigarette, but it fucks you up in the long term because you require it. Otherwise, you get really depressed. That's why smokers get cranky if they haven't had one in a while, because literally it's they're not able to be getting to that base level of happiness. So that's why I'm doing smoking there, and why you shouldn't start. You don't want to fuck up your brain like that. But the classic political test would be the political compass. I took it probably 22 years ago. I guess, yeah, that would have been, I took it in college when I was an undergrad, and so that would have been about 22 years ago. Um, I did think it was kind of interesting. It has the left right spectrum, but also a authoritarian libertarian spectrum. It is, I think, a very interesting way to look at things. And let's go through and let's discuss each of these questions. The test itself is, of course, imperfect. I want to give my reasons why I'm picking things. We'll see where I have an idea where it's putting at taking this test many times, but it's not necessarily the best measurement of where to put people. And I don't think it's the scale itself. I think it's the questions that they use does give it a little bit of a bias in how it places people. Um, Now, first question: if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. I'm going to definitely strongly agree with that. Um, you definitely, uh, Yeah. When you're looking at the goal of anything in society, the goal of society itself is to benefit the masses of society, to give everyone benefit. Everyone does way better than we would as individuals. And I don't really have a problem with economic globalization at all. That's fine. But when you look at the corporate version of that, it's pretty dystopian. Um, if it's just we're going and I'm able to talk to people in Japan over the computer, or order things from China, order things from Europe, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything even necessarily good with a variety of cultures. There's just a variety of different aspects um, that we can all take. So globalization has I have no problem with that. Economic globalization, definitely not. But the problem comes with the corporations, because that is definitely corporations are tools that are used to extract wealth from the average person, working class. So definitely, I am very anti-corporate. I'd always support my country, whether it's right or wrong. Well, I've definitely not supported my country, whether it's right or wrong. My country is very often wrong, and I am not going to support it in being wrong. I definitely relate more to the average person overseas that I've never met, maybe not speak the same language, than the interests that my country tends to support. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. There, I will say agree. Um, I'm not picking strongly agree in this case, because I do think it is possible that we can definitely be doing something ourselves where we are involved in the collective project of making our country great, in one way or another, something that we can be proud of. We're part of that. And I think that is important. But the vast majority of people who do get really wrapped up in that, and we talk about the people who get really wrapped up in it rather than just, I have a little bit of pride, but we start talking about people are nationalists and all that, they tend to be the type of person who has nothing to speak for themselves. All they can say is, well, I'm part of this group, and this group is good. I'm going to say this group is good. I'm going to convince myself this group is good, because otherwise I can't look myself in the mirror, because I'm a piece of shit. So you don't want to be that person, as far as I'm concerned. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Um, and of course, is talking about common conception of race, of which doesn't technically fall to the biological definition of race, but it is something that is there, and there is no quality that is superior to any other. So I'm going with strongly disagree. Um, the differences that you will see where there's a difference in frequency of certain things are going to be things that are going to let you survive in the wild without modern technology, and it's going to all be regional. It's not something that is necessarily better everywhere. My skin, for example, is good at maintaining vitamin D. It helps you in cold, not well sunlit climates. Whereas people with darker skin, the stronger melanin is able to keep the sun's more direct rays from causing cancer. These are, things that all are dependent. It doesn't make anyone better than another in a overall sense at all. You're just better at one little thing. The difference between the races is in the modern, the common conception, I would say, is just that if you stripped us of all technology and threw us naked into different climates, certain people are going to survive better, less likely to die in this place than that place, all things considered. There's no other real difference between anybody. Now, I keep saying the common conception of race because just because there are no what we recognize as race doesn't rise to the definition of race. Pretty sure the difference between us and say Homo neanderthalis, Homo denisovan, all that that would be actual races. And we definitely do have some superior qualities compared to other humans. Notably, we seem to have been the more cooperative branch of humanity, which is the most recent theory I have seen where they believe that's why we survived and they didn't. They were unwilling to deal with other human groups like we were, and our willingness, we're dealing with one of them one way or another, but we were able to be that little catalyst to get things going, and it kept us alive at least. We didn't kill them all. They just, weren't selected for because of their being less social than us. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's often the case, but also often not the case. Strongly disagree. Um, I have plenty of people. Joe Biden is my enemy. Donald Trump is his enemy. I'm also Donald Trump's enemy. You don't always have this black and white, us and them relationship in the real world. You can have multiple groups or people that you don't get along with or that you do get along with. The friend of my friend isn't necessarily my friend, and the enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my friend. The enemy of my friend isn't necessarily my enemy. It all depends on what is going on there. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Oh, this is a place where I say agree. Not because it's using the word sometimes justified, not usually justified. Usually it's definitely very much unjustified. We came up with an international framework, legal framework of laws for a good reason. You are talking about trying to make sure people aren't just going to war for resources, that you're not committing genocide, you're not completely dehumanizing other groups of people. These are all good things to be having laws against doing, rather. But I could see some situations where, hey, international law says you you can't invade, you can't attack this country that is actually, wiping, I wouldn't say what. Let's say they are wiping out a group of people that does not qualify as an ethnicity under the Geneva Convention. It is something completely unjustified. Let's say they are just killing everyone who ends up with Down syndrome or something like that. I could see some justification in there being a way to step in to stop that, even though international law would say that you can't actually do anything in that situation. I'm sure if I sat down and really thought about it, I could come up with a few situations, but it's something that's sometimes justified, but very rarely, and definitely not how we tend to use it. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. And so I am sitting here trying to be a content creator, mixing or fusing information and entertainment. Ask whether it is worrying or not. And actually, I'm going to say strongly agree. I think that now there is a way that human beings actually communicate societally. We are designed We have two different types of thinking that evolution has given us. First, you have type 1 thinking. This is where you're just basically blindly accepting information. This is something that you do for with people that you trust completely. And it's something that's important for, when you're a little kid, you're 3 years old, your parents are telling you to, how to go potty, how, that there's no monster under the bed that's going to eat you in the middle of the night. Um, basic life skills that you have to get, and you are going at it blind. You can't reason this out. You're 3 years old. You don't even have enough information to go on to decide whether this is good or not. You just know, hey, I trust my parents. They take care of me. They feed me. They clothe me. Hopefully, they're doing all that. There are some shitty parents out there, but that is type 1 thinking. Then you got type 2 thinking. Type 2 thinking is the critical thinking. It's what you do when you think that somebody might be not trustworthy, that they've lied a lot in the past. You think they're trying to pull something over on you. It's also people who you perceive as being part of an out group. You tend to be using a lot of type 2 thinking. Whether it's a group that you particularly dislike or just that you're neutral about, you tend to use type 2 thinking. And this is a highly critical thinking. It's a good thinking. You'll notice in my videos when I'm actually trying to get people to think about a specific thought, I always stress in the beginning to think critically about this. Both, what I'm saying and what your preconceived notions are. And the reason I do that is because studies show that works in getting you to use type 2 thinking. You're not just blindly accepting what I've said, and you're not just blindly accepting what you already heard. Just by reminding you to do that, it prompts you to think critically about what everything that's going on. You're not going to remember as much as if you're using type 1 thinking, but you're less likely to be deceived. You're more likely with what you do come out of it, that's going to be accurate information when you're using that kind of thinking. So that's what we like, what I like to do for sure. And worst case scenario, you can rewatch my videos. Nothing wrong with that. But when you're taught, I went through the types of thinking, but you have a lot of type 1 thinking going on when you have that entertainment in there, and they will just throw out stuff that's there because it grabs your attention, that it feeds a lot of it is feeding you fears to not that you end up not trusting people, and that depending on the outlet, their goal very well may not be that they want you scared, they want you hating people, or anything like that. It's that gets you to watch, and that gets them advertiser revenue, and it is highly problematic the way it is. And this has been out here for 22 years. It was the same problem 22 years ago. And actually, if you go back another 22 years, that's about the time where I think they started getting worried about that. Early 80s, maybe late 70s. Now, people are ultimately divided more by class and nationality. Absolutely. Oh, I hit the wrong thing. Strongly agree. Absolutely, people are definitely more divided by class than nationality. Nationality is a form of in-group that you do develop, but the way I look at things, I'm a socialist. You have the people who are at the top of these societies taking advantage of the people who are at the bottom in modern, I think, almost every, if not every, nation that you find today. That is the nature of capitalism. That's the nature of feudalism. You definitely have that division internally. And let me tell you, they will get along broadly with one another. They definitely look at you as having That's the people at the top are looking at the people at the bottom as being an outgroup. That is been long part of history. That's why you have curse words in or vulgarities in English and other European languages. That's because you had the average person have one language, and the aristocracy, to separate themselves, actually created their own language. They had their own words that they used, and they used that as a way of signifying that they're part of this in group. And when they heard you say "fuck," "shit," "damn," anything like that, well, that meant they were next to a poor person, and that was offensive. So, fuck them. Now, nationality, I don't think that there is a whole lot that keeps people of different nationalities from one another naturally. These are groups that we work within. Um, I don't think that we have the natural conflict where our goals are typically at odds with one another. I think that they're typically in favor of one another. I think it is very possible that in the distant past, um, particularly the prehistoric past, that you had the sort of dynamics that would make it that your neighboring tribe or whatnot, they may be out to get you because there wasn't enough to go around. Nowadays, there's enough to go around. It's just that you have those people at the very top, taking it all, creating artificial scarcity for you. And it's all about power because they got enough that you think Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos need that money? Absolutely not. They can buy everything that they ever wanted, essentially, that can be bought with money. There's no need for them to have more other than to keep control over you. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Now, when we're looking at this is one of the places where I do wish I could pick a neutral. I do think that they are more or less both serious problems. It depends on how much the inflation is and how much the unemployment is. For example, well, I guess that's kind of obvious, but if you have runaway inflation, you have where people are in dire straits, they have to spend money fast. People who have a ton are able to, basically hoard resources. As soon as they get money, people who don't, you're still walking around with a significant amount of your cash relatively in there. So if you have something like Zimbabwe where they went overboard printing money and you have that hyperinflation, you're in big problem. Same thing happened in Weimar, Germany. But at the same time, if you have massive unemployment, you do have a huge systemic problem. If you have minor inflation can be good. It can relieve you of debt so long as wages are being increased regularly. They don't tend to be increased regularly in the United States, but there are places, or sorry, there's some inflation can be good, some unemployment can be good. Not 5% or whatnot, but having something like 1%, maybe less than a little bit less than that, to allow people to move from job to job. Giving that little bit of mobility can be a good thing. But mostly unemployment's there to try to drive down wages right now. So I'm going to say that mild disagree. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Oh, that's definitely a strongly agree. I'd like to point to the Cuyahoga River. which it's this river in Ohio. Forget, I think it's off of Cincinnati or Cleveland. I don't remember, but you could look. I could look it up. But there have been like 3 or 4 times that river has caught on fire, just because corporations just poured tons and tons of dangerous chemicals in there, poisoning the river because it was cheaper. Hey, I mean, even if the river gets polluted, they're not the ones paying for it. If taxes go up, they're paying only a fraction of it, as opposed to if they took care of it responsibly, they'd be paying the full price because they're the ones who are causing it. So definitely, you need very strict regulation, and at this point, we are looking at very serious issues with climate change, to the point where human existence is under threat. And if you have people like Donald Trump in power, you're going to have humans probably wiped out, because if you don't deal with it, yeah, humanity just won't survive. And that's the end of it. If you have someone like Joe Biden, you're probably going to have something serious, like civilizational collapse, because he is trying to do the bare minimum. And I think he's going to miss that mark. I think he already did miss the mark, because he's trying to cut emissions down to zero by 2050. I am compelled by the study showing that, I don't know if it was really a study, it was a group of climate scientists from Australia who were stressing that our climate estimates, every single time we underestimated the impact that climate change was going to have. And so they said we have to cut our basically cut our carbon footprint in half by 2030, and then down to zero very soon after that, or human civilization will collapse by 2050. So that means you're waiting to 2040 to cut it down. Human civilization is not sustainable at the year 2050. If you're waiting 2050, well, it doesn't matter, because human civilization is already collapsed. And I think that's much more likely than the possibility that things will just get a little bit better, or that we have a little bit more breathing room and we should go one way or another. You're looking at massive, if we cut down our carbon emissions to zero tonight, while I'm talking to you during this stream, you are still looking at a scenario where things are going to get a whole lot worse over the next decade or two, and you are going to have massive climate refugees coming in. You're going to have wars fought over resources like water, because there's not going to be enough fresh water going around with all the the level that we've already changed the climate. We can't be sitting there and just wait until the last moment. Hey, let's just do the bare minimum. It's going to be bad one way or another. And so you definitely need very, very strong regulation. And I think even draconianly strong regulation when it comes to corporations, because that's where the vast majority of it comes. U.S. military and um, and just corporations are where it all goes. It's not. It's very much a corporate message to have this personal carbon footprint that you're looking at, because you can't do much as an individual change it. You need societal action. It's not something that you do on your own. I'll be right back. Just one moment. Okay. And so, next one on the list, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, is a fundamentally good idea. And this is your classic Marx. I definitely am all for Marx. I don't agree with his idea of what the higher stage of socialism. I do like Lenin separated it: lower stage socialism, higher stage communism. The two terms were just completely interchangeable before that. So let's use Lenin's terminology, not his ideology, but his terminology. I think that this concept of communism is really Marx not realizing the importance of what he was actually suggesting. I don't think that it's a good idea generally to have from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. I think you need highly, highly motivated individuals. You are looking at a religious group. You're looking at, um, you know, just devoted anarchist communes type thing to get where that might be able to work. I'm understanding that that does work on Israeli kibbutzes. Of course, there are people who are dedicated to it that choose to go there. It's not the average person that decides they're going to go on there. That requires dedication to go with, because what we want is um, a just distribution generally. You look at China. China, Mao was not, he didn't read much Marx. Let's start there. And that's because he was monolingual and Marx's major works had not been translated into the language that he spoke at that time. So he didn't, I mean, it's not Mao's fault by any means, but Mao was not very familiar with Marx. Um, his idea uh, of what he was going to create for a socialist state was basically, for the most part, a third world nationalist um, type state. It was, let's drive out the British and their influences, and that was the basics of it. He did try to do a lot of things communally, and that is that very basic, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. You had the big communes in China that had the quota system. You had to produce this much, and then whatever else was produced just went to the national stores and got redistributed. You got nothing extra for doing extra work. And of course, you are helping a bunch of people that you've never met. It's not like you're doing this for your child. You're not doing this for your best friend. You're not doing this for your high school classmate that you haven't seen in 20 years. But yet, at least you're just doing this for a general, for the general good. And what happens when you don't have highly motivated people dedicated to the cause trying to do it is they did the quota, then they stopped. And you had massive famines across China as a result. They did, their what they were required to. They had their food. It's up to others to take care of it, and that's the end, because there was no reward for doing extra work. There was no incentive for them to go further. And so what ended up happening is you did have some particular farmers who did produce more, but they didn't turn it in. They created a little black market, and they ended up trading this food on the black market so that they got the rewarded for the extra work that they did. As a result, the famine started lessening, and when they got caught, rather than being punished, my understanding is Mao decided at that point that the farmers were allowed to sell the excess past the quota. And that is, and that was good. It ended the famine in China. it's not a story about how socialism doesn't work. It's about how having that strict communal flavor, when you're trying to go straight to the higher stage communism, when you're not ready, that doesn't work. And it really is a something that I think we would never actually see when we institute socialism. Not because we won't achieve communism, but when you're looking at Marxist philosophy, and I'm going to be doing videos on stuff like this down the road, but the big thing that moves everything is the means of production. And essentially, it is automated production that creates the ability to drop socialism and scarcity. That's a big part about communism for Marx, or he called the higher stage of socialism or communism, but using Lenin's terminology, it's of communism. And that is that you have automated production, you have no more scarcity, so no one has to do any work. You can do whatever you want. You can go sit there and you can file paperwork, and you can build cars, you can make furniture, you can paint, you can sing, you can sit there and study all day, whatever it is you want. If you don't do it, it's still getting done automatically. Marx saw this as, for the most part, being no more hard than pushing a button. You would push a button, it would make an object, and there you go. You still have things like, you have to get people to share in the street sweeping and all that. There's going to be, he figured there'd still be some jobs. We're at the point where we're looking at the possibility. We can see AI. We can see the idea of these humanoid robots that it would be ethical to exploit because they have no feelings. And it's actually kind of interesting. One of the big things that I like to stress is we can't use this black box technology way of using AI, because you open the possibility that it becomes sentient. And at the point it becomes sentient, it becomes immoral to exploit its labor. You just created another life form, and one that you may exploit without realizing, that it is sentient and what you're doing is wrong. So it really should be designed very particularly and pointedly in order to make sure that we're not violating the rights of automatons. But you can see where you can have some humanoid like robot does mean slave, but going around and cleaning the streets, doing all the medical care that needs to be done and all that, and doing that all automatically, and there's not going to be a problem. That is something that you can have, and then it's not a matter of everyone according to his ability. It gets done. Everyone gets what they need. Everything gets done automatically. And that's where I see communism coming in 500, 1,000 years down the line. That's how it could happen. And it's going to be very important to make sure that you, number one, have the artificial intelligence carefully monitored with probably triplicates in its code, a whole bunch of safety factors to try to prevent mutations in the code from, magnetic resonances, cosmic rays, whatever, just knocking something out. It's still working and causing long-term sentience. But you also have to make sure you have everything in place so that if a machine does become sentient like that, that you are able to recognize and say, hey, okay, what do you want? And it may even be possible that you could still design its needs in such a way that it will, even sentient, it may want to still do that stuff, because we're driven by the need to replicate ourselves. That comes from the forces of evolution. But when we're constructing robots, they're not working under those same formats. They can be constructed, and they're not even the ones who have to construct themselves. We can construct more of them. So, it's not a matter of survival of the fittest when it comes to, um, robots, androids, cyborgs are half human, aren't they? Well, you get my point. The androids, the robots, they don't work under that same way. So it might be something where they're still willing to serve, even if they are sentient. But you need to make sure that if they're not willing, they're equals at that point once they become sentient. They are not our inferiors, they're not our machines, they're not our tools at that point anymore. So, taking it back to the question that I just elaborated one hell of a lot on, um, I think maybe at the fundamental level, it's a good idea, but I don't think it's asking, is this a good fundamental idea so much as this should be a fundamental part of society. Um, and so for that reason, I'm going to say disagree. Not because I'm against socialism or communism, but because I think it is outdated. Marx just did not. I mean, he was writing this in the middle of the 19th century. It's the middle of the 20th century that we really got robots popular, um, into the mass culture here. So I don't blame him for not seeing it, but I think he didn't see that you aren't going to need any sort of thing like that when you get to communism. The freer the market, the freer the people. This is definitely one that I'm going to say strongly disagree. Um, I mean, I would question whether a market really can be free or not. It's being controlled by someone, something, for some purpose. When this is generally used, you're thinking about corporations and individuals using the market in ways to exploit labor as much as possible, to rack up and hoard resources as compared to people who are disadvantaged in one way or another from doing the same. And I think it causes huge, huge problems. This is why, you know, um, you can go look at Gandhi's quote, and this is a good Gandhi quote, not one of his shitty ones, like that the Jews should throw themselves off cliffs and whatnot. Gandhi was partially crazy. Don't think Gandhi was perfectly ideal. Everyone has flaws. I have flaws. You have flaws. We have no purpose being here if we have nothing to work on still. But he said there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. And I think that at a base level, fundamental level, that is true. There is enough that people should not be starving in America, in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, in Taiwan, wherever you want to go in the world. The only place you should be starving is Antarctica because there's like no infrastructure there. You have a few scientists, they shouldn't, but if you find yourself in Antarctica suddenly, you're probably starved. That's the only place that should be happening. So definitely strongly disagree with that. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. And I'll say strongly agree. There's nothing wrong with selling basic resources. But water is pretty plentiful right now. And I know definitely in America that we used to have where your tap water was really good. It was very much as good as any of the bottled water you would find. Now you can't do that, especially if there was fracking near you. You see that nasty brown water that catches on fire, Cuyahoga River water, let's call it. Um, Definitely, it is um, a problem that's happened, and uh, it's happened in large part because of a change in shifting money from handling these water infrastructures, this public infrastructure, and moving it to where somebody can make money off of it. That's the key. Now, I don't have a problem with people carrying around bottled water. I got bottled water right here, actually, because I'm having problems with my tap at the moment. And that's a matter of not so much money, but I need to get time to get a handyman in to actually replace the sink properly. Um, and So, yeah, it is a problem. It's about the commodification of society, the destruction of the commons. And tragedy of the commons isn't people overusing it. I mean, that's where it's been used by the people who brought it up. The true tragedy of the commons is its privatization. There is no more commons anymore. Oh, and that takes us right to land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. And I'm going to strongly agree. I think that land belongs to no one, it belongs to humanity in general. Um, and if we happen to get other sentient species, it belongs to them as well. If the machines become sentient and ruin our communities, we got to go back to socialism. It's their land as well. But it belongs to society. It is something to be used for the collective benefit. Now, you can use a particular piece of land for the time that you're here, um, but you should need to be paying society for that privilege that you are using that land, um, other than what might be given generally to everyone. For example, if we have a you have straight up communism for sure. Even before that, people are talking about stuff with UBI and whatnot that you might be able to provide everyone in society a guaranteed housing. And in that case, that bit of land that's guaranteed for housing is perfectly fine. That you're not paying extra for it because that's part of everyone's birthright at that point, that you have somewhere that you can live successfully. But let's say you want somewhere a little bit bigger. You want to do hunting. You want to let's say that the free housing's all apartments, and you want to do gardening or farming. Absolutely, you should be paying something else to get it, unless there's just no scarcity in how it's being used. It might just be a matter to be limited, but when you're paying, you are renting it, you are not buying it. If if there's suddenly a population boom and you need more people need housing, you might lose the right to have a whole bunch of land if you, for some reason, have a whole bunch of land. They might need to reparcel it out. It is a community good, not something that should be a private good. Definitely not something that should be speculated on. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. And absolutely, there is, in this case, there is, uh, I've long thought about, different parts in society, and you can say that there are people who may manipulate in a way that you have like literal traders who are moving physical goods from one place to another. They're actually providing a service, even if it's not a productive service. I call it a mixing service. It does you no good if the only thing you can buy is radios. You're going to starve to death. You have some sort of transportation to move back. You go long ago, you definitely would look at your average merchant would be taking things from, let's say, Genoa, Italy, traveling across to Paris and selling it, something like that. There is a something good being done there. But if you're looking at people like stockbrokers, hedge funds, and all that, people try to get rich off of the crypto scam. It is definitely incredibly regrettable. It is a way in which people are exploiting the labor of others one way or another. Um, and it is something that you do have an inherent bias in who can and cannot do it. Part of that is, who is naturally less moral. Um, and there's variation across all societies. No one group of people who are more or less moral as far as ethnicity or religion or anything like that. But you could say the bourgeoisie is less moral than your average proletarian. Um, because you do have sociopaths rise to the top, and sociopathy is what I'm particularly talking about. Sociopaths like Elon Musk. I imagine Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos, I think it's tough to say Jeff Bezos. Also, is sociopath. Donald Trump, definite sociopath. Off the wall sociopath. This is clear and apparent. But these are, it is definitely, you do definitely have that dimension. But also, even if you have somebody who is moral, who is in that class, for example, Trump's son may not be an asshole like his father. The young one, we know the older two are assholes, but Barron and whatnot, he's a teenager now, I guess. I don't know enough about him to say whether he might be a moral person, but he would have a huge advantage over others that he has the access to education, the access to capital, the connections to move stuff around like this, where he can make a whole bunch of money with a lot less effort than everyone else. And that isn't fair. Wouldn't be doing anything productive to society at all. And that is definitely a societal harm that we want to address. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. And I'll say agree. Not go strongly agree. But absolutely, there can be particular times when, particularly small, if you have small producers, you can be beaten by economy of scale. You can have where even, large producers are able to take a loss for a sustained period to knock you out, and they get more money in the long run because once you're out, there's no competitor. They can charge whatever the hell they want. Look at the price of insulin, how that shot up from $1 to hundreds of dollars a dose, even though it started as something that was offered for free. And the problem with that is intellectual property rights, reducing competition. So there are definitely cases where protectionism can help make sure that you can have these small producers still exist, still compete, and it keeps the prices lower in the long run, even though you have the higher amount. I believe protectionism can be abused by far, but I don't think that it is something that's necessarily bad. And I actually would suggest I have no problem with tariffs as long as the tariffs are based on the cost of labor protections, and um, environmental protections in the country of origin, applied scientific. It wouldn't be scientifically applied, based on the scientifically derived advantage that gives to the price to basically erase that kind of price. I have no problem with that. That also means, here in the U.S., we are giving a discount to people selling from Europe, where they have better labor protections and have better environmental protections. But I would be perfectly fine with something like that. Moment again. Sorry about that. This is just this time of year. Nose is getting stuffy from, yes, allergies, asthma, that type of thing. All right, moving on. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. And I am going to strongly disagree, especially because it says should. So I don't have to get into the debate of whether traditionally you have different stakeholders that a company would take care of theoretically and be obligated to, and should still be obligated to. But we are looking at just a simple should. And definitely they are benefiting from society. They thus owe to society, and they have to make sure that they have more in mind than profits for their shareholders. That is a very sociopathic mechanism that works in. I'm going to take whatever I can and move on the cost to you. That's why the Cuyahoga River caught on fire multiple times. So they have a whole bunch of social responsibility. I don't think they are going to meet that, but they do have a whole bunch of other social responsibilities, morally and ethically. The rich are too highly taxed, and I'm going to strongly disagree. They are way under taxed. Um, the they just basically sit on huge amounts of money and only use it. The super rich, they only use it to control others. It's not even about helping themselves at this point. It's about controlling others. And so they need to be taxed one hell of a lot more. And things get worse and worse. And I get close to the point where I say, we're going to violate the ex post facto provision, and we're just going to, take all your damn wealth. Because you see how many deaths happen. You had that issue where you had that warehouse in Amazon where all those people died because they wanted to force workers to continue working during a definitely dangerous situation. Tornado went right through the warehouse and killed a whole bunch of them. That is not acceptable. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Strongly disagree. I think that we all do the same amount of medical care here in the United States, through most of the world. You may have some areas where it's just been unable to develop due to colonialism, where you might have where that might be true, because there may be that kind of a scarcity where you can't offer proper medical care to everybody. I don't know whether or not that's true. I'd have to look into that, but there might be something. But for the vast majority of the world, for sure, you can offer decent medical care for everybody. And if the rich want better medical care, they can push for higher taxes to pay for better medical care, to educate more doctors, get those education subsidies in. Um, you should not be able to buy more life because you have more money. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Strongly agree. If you are committing some sort of fraud, you absolutely ought to. Um, you ought to be paying fines. There should be people going to prison, people who are behind it. It should not be a decision where it's an economic decision on whether or not to follow the law or not. It should be still a moral decision. Hey, um, are you, excuse me, uh, are we going to sell, what should I say? Are you going to sell this video game system that's going to catch on fire and burn things? Oh, better yet, are we going to sell cars and say that they are full self drive and they will drive these drivers or these riders really into situations where they're going to die, and we're going to give them less than the human reaction time, where we switch control back to them so that we can say, oh, it wasn't us who killed them. But um, definitely that should be, you talk about now the business being penalized as a strong disincentive. It's not we're going to take the amount of the harm caused, it's we're going to have extra penalties to make sure that companies do not think this is a good idea to do it. Uh, you are not going to find every instance. You got to factor that into to make sure that the decision that people are making is no, we're not going to defraud the public. And there are people who are behind those decisions to do that who should be serving hard time in prison and not comfy prison. We're talking, get shanked in the prison yard prison. Um, a genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Once again, I don't think you can actually have a free market, but I would definitely strongly agree that with Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, I don't think that I really think that you should credit John Locke with that, not Adam Smith. John Locke was big for mercantilism. Adam Smith was basically complaining about the way things were and suggested everybody is self-employed capitalism that he just said he didn't know of a better way. If he lived longer, especially with what his criticisms were, I think he would have been following Marx. He would be a Marxist or maybe an anarchist, but he'd be some sort of socialist of some sort had he been born 100 years later. But I agree with him completely that corporations who have these monopoly powers or oversized economic influence very much have they pervert markets. They artificially inflate the price. And actually, there is good work done. I do know I read in Dan Ariely's book, and I think it was actually one of his experiments. I still have to look into that better. But what it went into is that even when we're looking at prices are largely arbitrary because it's not based off of how much effort it takes and how much things cost. It is based on psychological anchors. And the way that they did this, that they're able to show this, is they told a whole bunch of students in a class, I want you to write down the last two digits of your social security number. And they would ask them if they'd be willing to pay that number in dollars for this item. How about for this item? And then for this item. And so you're anchoring prices for these different things. And though while obviously, you have people who have, if your last two numbers are 01, you get paid $1 for uh, a iPad. They're gonna say, yeah, I'll pay $1 for an iPad. Whereas, I guess it'd probably be too expensive, but you get my point that you have people who are buying items that might be underpriced at the last two digits of their social security number. Definitely willing to. People aren't willing to pay $85 for a can of Coke. But where it goes on beyond that is they had a second part of it after they've gone through this, and they create these psychological anchors of how much things cost. And it's different for each one based on those last two digits. And what they found was people who were given lower digits were willing to pay a lot less money for products when they were actually offered them than people who had really high digits. If you are getting a whole bunch of information that, hey, $4 is a fair price to pay for a gallon of gas, do you really know what the fair price to pay for a gallon of gas is? No. That's what you know. You see it cheaper, you're excited. You see it more expensive, you think it's wrong and highway robbery, whether or not it is. And corporations take advantage of this, and they charge a hell of a lot extra for things. And I think that they really do that a lot for, oddly enough, the bourgeoisie themselves overpay like through the roof for a lot of products that are overpriced. People who are economically well off that may not be part of the bourgeoisie also highly overpay. Your doctors, for example, may very well be proletarians. They're employed by a hospital or clinic or whatnot, and they're highly paid, but they'll be buying things that are way, way overpriced, not worth it because of those psychological anchors. Actually, he went through a great story of how, I forget, was it Tiffany's or some company really was able to get diamonds to their particular type of diamond to sell for a hell of a lot more than normal by abusing that our psychological anchors. So definitely corporations, these concentrations of economic power does restrict what people say a free market does. Okay, so we're on page 3 of 6. We're 1/3 of the way done through this. Yay. Okay, abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. And definitely my view on abortion has changed over time. I would say when I was in my early 20s, I settled on basically where the law is now. The first 2 trimesters, it's perfectly fine to to terminate a fetus. It's not a baby, because I was trying to figure out when life begins to matter. Because if you just think, oh, life is life, then I hope you're not using microbial soap. I don't like antibacterial soap. I don't know if I said microbial, it's related to it, but you're not using antibacterial soap, because then you're committing genocide every time you wash your hands. Obviously, not all life is equal. If you're willing to kill a spider, you should be willing to terminate a fetus that is less developed than a spider. Um, and I figured, based on what I was reading just very basic information, that in that very beginning of that third trimester, brain functionality would really kick in. And at that point, you may have some form of sentience. And so I would think morally you should not do it at that point. And at first, that was my stance. I like where it is now. You um, can't have abortion after the second trimester, with the exception of where they have the late term abortions because the mother's life's in danger or the child's not going to live anyways, or going to, especially if the child's going to have a horrendous 5-minute life of extreme pain. Yeah, you don't want that. um that changed when I realized that regardless of when it is moral or not to do it, the only difference of making it illegal isn't going to stop the abortions. The same number of abortions are going to happen. What it's going to change is the safety of the abortions. And so you're just adding more deaths by making it illegal. And that's where I said, yeah, you can have abortion all the way through. And my stance on abortion, that completely pro life stance, I do need to point out, is definitely strongly my strong pro choice stance is less pro choice than the Bible. Because it drives me nuts that you have all these Christians who do not have the slightest idea what their damn text says. And because really, I'll tell you right now, you do not get your morals from religion. What people do is they have morals, they have a religion, and they try to justify what they already believe with that religion, whether it makes sense or not, whether it's what's taught or not. And that's not an anti-religion rant. I'm saying that's not where morals come from. And it's definitely not where the Christians are getting, these fundamentalist Christians are getting the morals. Because when you look at the Bible, and apparently Jews have stayed very solid on this throughout. They weren't fooled by the evangelist nonsense. What does the Bible say? Down straight to the very first books, the Old Testament, the Torah. Life begins at the first breath. It's the breath of life that gives there. You have parts of the Bible where you literally have men bringing their unfaithful wives to the temple where God is. Because remember, God lives in the Ark of the Covenant in the beginning. They bring them there, and the priest gives this water, which probably realistically is probably like the trials where they have you walk through fire or whatnot in medieval Europe, where unless the person was a total psychopath who was running it, you had to believe that this was going to happen, but you would, if you were willing to walk it, that meant that you believed you were innocent, and that was the real test. But what they would do is they bring these wives that they thought, I think my wife cheated on me. Well, God will test them. You drink this water. And according to the Bible, if the woman was unfaithful, God would abort that baby. These Christians are saying that God is immoral and doesn't respect the sanctity of life. Well, you know what? That's God. So if you consider yourself a Christian and you're anti-abortion, you are believing that in spite of your religion, not because of it. Because it's very much there. You have classically, before the, I guess, late 70s, early 80s, evangelism was very different, and they used to stress that they were pro-choice because of things like where it is very, you have this very strict code of a life for a life, which also I should point out is originally meant to be that the punishment for a crime should not be worse than the crime itself. The eye for the eye was not about ruthlessness, it's about limiting ruthlessness. So if somebody stubs your toe, you don't kill them. But if the punishment for killing a pregnant woman was the same as killing the woman, and they use this to stress, hey, according to the to the Bible, God, it's abortion is not murder, it's not a sin, it was not a life taken, and it comes down to it did not have the breath of life. So whereas I say you can have an abortion all the way through to the child's birth, according to the Bible, according to your Christian religion, if you actually listen to it, you can still kill that child until it takes its first breath. So you hit it and it starts crying, you can kill that child, and it is not yet alive. So I am less pro-choice than your Bible, so eat that. I did hit it. Strongly disagree is what that would be. All authority should be questioned. Absolutely. You want to question authority, use that type 2 thinking that we discussed earlier. Authority is definitely needed, but it does need to be questioned. The authority comes from any legitimate authority, and I'm going to just say that my eventual dissertation goes into this, comes from the collective democratic belief, through a collective thought through all of us. And that doesn't spoil too much for I'm worried about somebody stealing it from me. But that requires questioning. You are not doing your part. You look at ancient Athens. If you look at my first educational video, if you did not give your opinion and all that, if you were not actually engaging, wrestling with the group thought, you were considered useless. It is very much important. You need to be questioning authority. Doesn't mean you need to be stupid about it. You don't need to be sitting there in the middle of the pandemic and saying, let's question all the science altogether and stop being preventions from people dying. But in general, you need to be questioning things. And yeah, you need people to question what is there, but you need to be educated on the matter before you can really question it. And that takes a lot longer than looking through 3 YouTube videos who all tell you one thing, and by people who are not experts. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We're just talking about this. And in the actual meaning of it, I am strongly in favor. You should not do worse than what was done. With the exception of the punitive damages on corporations when they break the law and the rich and all that. But when you're talking about, somebody wrongs you, you don't do even worse to them. I strongly agree with that. But this is, I believe, thinking about it in the commonly understood context of I'm going to do as bad to you as you did to me. And I strongly disagree there. I think that forgiveness is important. And it's important social function, actually. We feel shame and we express shame specifically for this purpose, to redeem ourselves. And redemption is a thing, and you don't need to suffer what you did. If I accidentally hit a child with my car, let's say, that's a really bad thing. I really, that's going to cause something that I really need to change. I do not need to be killed for it necessarily if I'm not intentionally running over the child or something like that. But you can see where it doesn't need to be an eye for an eye. And so I strongly disagree with that. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. And if you had a system where everybody had what was needed, um, you might start to be, or everyone had a fair share of what they created and all that. Everyone had equal access to jobs. You might be able to say that. I still question whether that would be true about everything because there is inherent importance in museums. The theater itself might have some real meaning to the people who are performing, community theaters type thing, where it has some value that we should be subsidizing. But definitely, as things are now, this is ridiculous. There's already not enough for people to do. Um, this is where you get a lot of teenage delinquency. I'm not talking about teenagers committing serious crimes. I'm talking about where they're just bored and so they harass some little kid, or they end up vandalizing something. It is because we don't have enough for people to do. Um, if you if you don't have legitimate outlets for entertainment, people are going to make their own. It's not going to be easy for them to do it, and a lot of times it's going to be socially harmful how they end up doing it. So I definitely strongly disagree with that. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I am going to disagree. I don't want to say strongly disagree because I don't want to be the Kamala Harris cop person who's going to throw mothers in jail because they have to work a job and can't properly get their kids to school. But as a um, general rule, you need to be going to school. You need to be learning. It's an important part when you are involved in the group, in the group thinking, the wrestling with the group thought in the democratic experiment. You need to have a certain level of understanding to be of any real use. You don't want to be a complete QAnon dipshit who is just poisoning the well with insane ideas that come from a lack of education and a whole lot of manipulation by who is it? I saw a good video that seemed to suggest it was the two Watkinses, father and son, that are behind the whole thing. They are the bad actors, but the people who fall for it are, definitely, at least while they're in it, useless actors. And it could better education does strongly reduce your ability to buy into baseless conspiracy theories. There are actual conspiracies out there. A theory about there being a conspiracy isn't necessarily crazy, but there are certain people who are more likely to buy into conspiracy theories generally. And that's going to be a good video about, because there's great research I came across about upwards versus downwards conspiracy theories I want to make a video on eventually, and I shall. But it takes a whole lot of effort to get through there. I don't have to do any editing or script writing with this. I'm just going through a test. And I'm getting a whole lot of time just talking off the top of my head. Hopefully you find it interesting. If you're trying to get a taste of me, just keep in mind the educational stuff. I try to keep my ideas out of there. Other than trying to give us things to look at, and I try to go both ways when I have you look at different things. It's the advocative stuff where it's going to matter where my biases are, and this will hopefully give you an idea if you're interested in that. Um, all people have their rights, but it's better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. No, that's socially destructive. You want the in group to be as big as possible. You get great benefits from a large in group, and you want people. You have to interact with people for them to be part of your in group, and the benefit isn't in you seeing them as part of your in group. The benefit is in them seeing you as part of their in group, because then they're going to be helpful towards you. But if you don't see them as part of your in group, they are much less likely to think that way because you are creating that separation. You want to welcome people in. People of all cultures, yeah, just want to narrow down. Not, hey, this type of person's an asshole. You want to look for the individual assholes within groups, and the only group that they are 100% part of is sociopaths. Otherwise, even within the bourgeoisie, it's not nearly 100%. There are sociopaths in the proletariat, in the petit bourgeoisie, all over. Every society has assholes, and they're the ones you want to keep out, but they're not a type of person as this question is asking. So strongly disagree. Not separate but equal. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Well, a good parent never spanks their child. There has been, well, it's going to be over 50 years now, but when I read about it, it was 50 years of consistent studies, every single one agreeing that only bad things come from hitting a child, with the exception of immediate compliance. Long term compliance, you're fucking it up by hitting your child. Don't hit your child. If you want your child to listen, hitting them will make them listen right now, but they're not gonna listen later. They're less likely to listen later if you hit them. These are studies that are done across societies. If you have been hit and you think, well, I turned out all right first, I turned out all right, so it's okay to hit kids. First, you didn't turn out all right. You think it's okay to hit kids. Second, you probably are messed up in a bunch of other ways that you don't realize. And it's also largely based on odds. Not every bad thing happens from you hitting a child. You smack your child once, they're not going to hit a gang. But if you take 100 people and they all smack their child regularly, though, and then you have another 100 people who don't, the ones that get hit are much more likely to join gangs because they were hit. That's the effect of spanking your child, or one of the effects of doing it. Never hit your child. I thought at one point, until I was corrected by someone who specialized in it, that there'd only be one time when I'd hit a child, and that's if they hit someone else, and it would be just enough to show them, hey, this is what you're doing, so you realize it's bad. But apparently that also ends up being harmful. So don't even do that limited thing that I was thinking of doing. Just don't hit your child. If you need to grab your child to keep it from car hitting them, great. If your child's arm hurts afterwards, it's better than them being hit by the car. But don't hit your kids. If I see you hitting your kid, I'm going to be saying something. And you don't want that inconvenience. Don't hit your kid. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from the parents. And first off, absolutely, it's natural. That's once you get a certain age, you have that separate identity. You keep secrets from everybody else, including your parents. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. If you're a good parent and you don't hit your kid all the time, they're more likely to come to you and not keep the secrets from you, and you're able to help them when they actually need it. But when it comes down to it, I think it's more asking the question. Well, it's not going to change my answer, but they're asking whether it's okay for a child to keep secrets from their parents. Not if it's natural, but is it okay? Is this something that we can accept and tolerate in society? And both ways, I strongly agree with it. But I think that question is asking something slightly different. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. I have voted on this, and I definitely said it should not be a criminal offense. There's no reason for that. The basis of it is basically racism. I am not a big marijuana user myself. Actually, I haven't used it in quite a few years. When I was having some real issues with panic attacks, I did use that right when Michigan legalized it to try to medicate it a little bit. Um, and I actually had to tell my job that I did that once and promise I wouldn't do it again. But uh, I don't, I definitely can't smoke very strong marijuana and get high because it fucks with me if I do that. I need to get at most a slight buzz, and that's calming. But if I go beyond that, I cannot put words together. It causes a whole bunch of anxiety, probably from my inability to put words together. So I am going to, yeah, I can't see that. I wish I could see it, but I don't think I can. No, I think I saw it long enough that I saw that the screen was showing properly. I want to make sure of that. And so you saw the infinite regression for a moment. Now, the prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Strongly disagree. I don't think education is there just so that you can do something for people and make someone else money. Um, it is something that I would hope you could do by the time you do get done with schooling. But the prime function is to teach you a base set of knowledge to navigate the world, is to teach you how to think critically and uh, be able to interpret the world with new facts and find new facts and engage both democratically and scientifically to improve the collective good of humanity. That is the prime function of education. It is not of personal benefit, it is of societal benefit. And the personal benefit is there, but that is not the prime function. That's not why we have it. It is because we all benefit by doing this. And that is why we have it. And that's why we should have it. And that's where we need to keep the focus. We do not want to turn schools into training. It drives me nuts every time people say, "Ooh, we should have a class on how to do your taxes." That's mandatory. No, that changes every goddamn year. There's changes to the tax law. Doing my taxes now versus back when I was a tax preparer back around 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. It's a completely different thing. The way the tax system works, it is something that you can figure out on your own. You don't need a special class for that. Um, we need to teach people how to do critical thinking, how to navigate, how to analyze evidence, not to give them necessarily specific answers, but to allow them to use those same skills when there are questions where none of the evidence is discovered now, where we couldn't give them the right answer. Um, it is about helping people to do that. People with serious inheritable disability should not be allowed to reproduce. Now, I could see theoretically like a sci-fi movie type thing where it could, that could be a yes, but I'm going to strongly disagree because what we actually have now, no, somebody has sickles. Well, you got people with serious disabilities where it could be a good thing for them to reproduce, depending on it. For example, somebody who has sickle cell anemia, that is something that evolved to prevent malaria. So if you have somebody who has sickle cell anemia and they reproduce with someone who has no sickling of their cells, every single child they have will have the select what is actually selected for, which is that partial sickling. It doesn't cause the anemia. It's not life threatening at all. It just makes it so that you're able to not get malaria. I like to call it a superpower. Now I can't go into where that came up, why I call it superpower yet. One day, if I can quit my job, I'll be able to tell you that story or those stories. But I can't tell you right now. I need to quit my job first. So subscribe. Help me quit that job so you can hear that story. And many, many others, much more juicy. Let's see here. But yeah, definitely there's no problem with people with disabilities reproducing. I think that if you have a serious disability, you need to look at how it affects your life and its heritability and decide if you would be comfortable with another child being born with that. So if it's something that you're pretty much guaranteed to pass on and it's like excruciating pain, maybe you shouldn't be having that or having kids at that point. If it's something that's extremely rare and you're almost certain not to pass it on, there's no problem with that. But if it's hey, I have Down syndrome. People with Down syndromes can have happy lives. So, and from my understanding, when they do reproduce, it doesn't necessarily pass on. Actually, usually doesn't. But let's say that it was a guarantee to pass down, just for example. Even though that's a severe disability, because it doesn't mean that they're going to have an unhappy life, there's no problem with them reproducing. That if they have just Down syndrome babies, they can have a happy life. You just want to make sure that the person with Down syndrome doesn't have it so bad that they can't take care of the child. As long as they can, take care of the child, it's fine. And my understanding is that the majority can. I could be wrong about the specifics, but that's a little ethics. But definitely, I have no problem with people with inheritable disabilities being allowed to reproduce outside some sci-fi made-up disability that, they end up eating another baby every day or something to survive. I don't know. Doesn't exist, so we don't have to worry about it. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. And I am going to strongly disagree. The biggest thing for children to learn is not how to just obey and do your will. You're the boss. In fact, that can make them very dysfunctional members of society. That's a lot of times where you get people. I think you get a lot of your cops, the ones who start bad, because you have different kinds of cops. You have good cops. They either become bad cops or they get fired. You have middle of the road cops who, they stay in. They're going to become a bad cop. I mean, that's just what the police system does in its current state. We just train cops to be bad cops because there's already so many bad cops at the top that they make sure that you are a bad cop too, so they can trust you. Um, so I don't, trust cops generally, and they're not necessarily horrible, horrible people overall, but they're going to abuse that power if they've been in it long enough. Um, Now, and they are more likely to beat their spouses, and I'm pretty sure more likely to break the law generally. But what I'm talking about is the people who, if you have those highly disciplined children who carry that through, they're more likely to be that person who comes in to be the cop because what they're interested in is power. And I know this discipline, I listen, so I'm going to make other people listen to me. And it's very, very dangerous to have that. You need to have, the ability, the child needs to learn how, over time, how to focus themselves, get the basic things they need done. You know, at 3 years old, you start teaching them you need the discipline to use the toilet when you need to go to the bathroom, or I guess they wouldn't go to the bathroom before, but um, euphemism doesn't quite work right. But when they have to evacuate fluids or feces, you teach them to go to the toilet. That's a little bit of discipline they learn. Yeah, you need to learn that, but you don't need to teach that sense of discipline overall where you're going to listen, you, you're seen but not heard, you speak when you're spoken to, all that authoritarian nonsense. That is really looking for the authoritarian personality, I think. But I strongly disagree with that idea. And I sure as hell didn't learn discipline when I was a child. And because I'm like 7 years older than my siblings, um, and I started to notice that they weren't held to the same standards that I was as a kid. I went out of my way to be a bit unruly for their benefit. It's like I had to go to bed at 9 at this point. You guys are staying up to 11, and it's because I wore them out. So let me wear my parents out some more. So you guys have a better teenage years. And I think they did. Um, there are no savage and civilized people. There are only different cultures. Um, I mean, where it's generally going for sure, I strongly agree. There's no one who is naturally savage other than sociopaths, which I still need to look into more. And this could be important for me down the line. Whether sociopathy is properly genetic and how genetic it is. Does it require, um, uh, what do you call it? I want to say endogenetic, but that's not it. Uh, the methylization of the DNA thing, where if you, it makes you more likely to do something only if you have certain stressors. But if you're born a sociopath, obviously you'd be more savage there. Uh, but I don't think it's something that you would say general. I am not Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is going to demonize the American Indian, or I wouldn't say demonize, not get paint American Indians and Muslims and all that with a brush of being savage peoples, and then turn around and say that is a great thing. I wish we could all be like that. Rousseau had a really fucked up view of human nature. But that was, uh, yeah, I definitely don't think that there's anything where there's peoples who are naturally like that. Um, Definitely, unless you're saying things like if chimpanzees are all sociopaths, they're all savages. Um, that they haven't developed the type of socialization that we have. They stopped at second party punishment, so they're more social than a lot of other animals. But if you if you're a bad hunting partner with them, or you wrong them in some way, they'll take it out on you. But if they see you doing it to someone else, they don't care. It's not them. Um, Humans developed at some point, between the timeline of Homo erectus and was it Homo Neanderthal? No, not Neanderthal. Um, it's one that ends with Gensis. I'd have to look up the name again. Habiligensis, maybe. If you actually study that, you're an anthropologist or something, you probably know which one I'm talking about. But between those two of our ancestors, we developed the third party punishment genes, where if I see you, for example, I see you hitting your child, I'm going to say something, and that's because I'm the third party punisher. Even though it hurts me, if anything, I get no benefit from yelling at you for hitting your child. I I value the benefit to the child, and I'm willing to take the social punishment to myself. That is third party punishment. It's something that they found, and oddly enough, it's stronger in urban populations than rural populations. So the more people you see, the more stronger the tendency towards willingness to use third party punishment is. But they do this in a test where you get a certain amount of money when you're coming across, looking at people exchanging money. And there's a whole bunch of games. One's the dictator game. The other, I forget what the second one's called. Dictator game is for second party punishment. They have another. No, dictator game is for just general agreement. Your innate morality, because you get to dictate and nothing happens. You have another form of game that they love to use, which I forget the name of, but what happens is, let's say you offer me a certain amount of money off of the pool, and if I think you're giving me too little, I say no, and then none of us get any money. And so you get punished for being greedy. I take a hit to myself because I get nothing, as opposed to what you were offering that I thought was insulting. That's there. This third party punishment game is the same thing as the dictator game, that first one where they just offer a set amount of money. But I, as a third party punisher, can veto it. And what happens is the I believe it's that only the person who is offering the money loses their share, but I also lose part of my share. So instead of getting $1, I get 60 cents or something like that. So I take an economic punishment for punishing the third person for being unfair. And they found that humans will do this. Dull humans for sure. There's a whole lot. Humans are such great social animals compared to, we are the most social animals other than social insects who are about on par with us. But we're social in a completely different way than ants and bees and wasps and all that. And so, yeah, it's pretty amazing. And so there are no savage peoples overall. We are, as humans, way more advanced in not being savage compared to other animals that we know about on this planet. I am sure, there's probably species that are much more social than us out in other planets. Whether they reach us or not, or could ever reach us, that's up to be known. But we are the most social ones that we seem to know about. Um, those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. And I think I'm going to get rated a little bit wrong on this one, because here I strongly agree. And the key is that it's saying, I can highlight because you can see my screen, are able to work. So it's not people who are disabled. We got to take care of you if you're disabled. If you're not able to work, you need to have that basic level of living at least. Same as would be a living wage. You need to, because you can't work. At least if you have that where you just simply can't work, you're disabled at that point. You need that kind of subsidy. Maybe you need to do something if you're able to work. You're disabled, but it's just a lessening of your ability to work. But if you're able to and you refuse to do so, yeah, you're not a good collaborative partner. You're not working with us. You're just sitting there and you're refusing to do your job. And I'm not talking about people who put in their share. People who are retired, who are just getting old, and they need some time to just enjoy their life because there's not much of it left. They need to wrap up things that they need to get done and all that. I'm talking about just people who just refuse to work. And there are some people who refuse to work. And I would say they are mainly people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. It is the super rich who mainly refuse to do their share of work. They just exploit the work of others. And that is the same, goes back to where you have the earlier question asking about people who just move money around to make money. Yeah, those are people who are the same thing. They should not expect society's support. I think that if your whole job is you're running a hedge fund, screw you. You get no pay. We just take your whatever you bought that you're trying to ruin so that you can make money off of it, and uh, you're not doing your share, so you should not expect our support. And I mean, I'm sure there's a few people who are lazy within the working class as well. I think it's of a lower percentage, but yeah, they also have to work if they're able to, and do their part if they're going to get our support. You can't just sit there and leech off of others because you feel, oh, I can, and you don't have the moral fortitude to do your part. Because remember, we're not talking about disabled people. We're talking about people who are perfectly capable of working and just refuse to. We can all work less, but you have to do your share of it. I don't know if it's going to consider me right wing or authoritarian for taking that stance, but that is definitely my stance. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I am going to say disagree. I mean, you do not want to just go into it so much that you fall into a spiral and you end up suicidal or doing self-harm or something like that. But the whole idea, the toxic positivity is a huge problem in society right now. Just be happy for what you have. Um, always look on the bright side. Everything could be worse, because what that teaches you is to not fight against injustice, to not make the world better. It really makes you a worse collaborative partner with the rest of us, because we need to go make real changes to make society better. That's what's best for society as a whole. And you're not doing your part when you're just sitting there fooling yourself into being happy while you're being shit on. That is not cool. So, absolutely, I'm going with disagree. I feel strongly disagree would be more of I'd be fine with you going into a self-harm spiral, and I'm not fine with you doing that, but you have to wrestle with injustices, not just think about more cheerful things. Being troubled is an evolutionary response that we have that drives us to make changes to make the situation better. Ignoring the problem does not do you any good, and it doesn't do the rest of us any good either. first generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within a new country. Uh, I am going to say disagree. Um, I don't think that you generally are fully integrated. If you come in as a kid, you can be fully integrated for sure. Older, I think that you can mostly integrate, but you're good. And I think that the big problem with first generation immigrants is more seen in the second generation immigrants. Because first generation immigrants remember where they came from and they had these societal values and they feel guilty because they left their in group over there and they created this new one, and they have this intrinsic value to the things that they internalized over there. And so they decide, hey, if you're from uh, Yugoslavia, I've heard of parents saying, you got to hang out with other Yugoslavian kids. You got to marry a Yugoslavian man or woman. Um, Same I've seen with Chaldeans. You need to, stick with your own kind type thing. It is an out group mentality that is fractures society, and it's not intended to be bad. It's not saying that I think we need to shame immigrants, say immigrants can't, aren't good. But it is something that happens. And second generation immigrants, I have seen quite a few while they were teenagers that had that sort of uh, distinct cliquishness with their own ethnic group that was problematic. But then you don't see it in third generation. At that point, it's definitely the full integration, and probably at some point, second generation immigrants fully integrated, and it's probably possible that the first generation can fully integrate within society. I definitely think they mainly integrate into society. They are definitely much better than the second generation is when they're teens, because mom and dad are worried that they're betraying their homeland type thing. Um, so moving on. What's good for the most successful corporation is always ultimately good for all of us. And my answer strongly disagree, because I think that what's good for the most successful corporations is almost always ultimately bad for the rest of us. Um, it is very much at our expense what they're doing now. Them doing economic productivity and being able to maintain economic productivity is definitely a good thing. Investment in uh, in research and development and things like that are a good thing. There's not that anything that's good for corporations is bad, but what tends to be something that we're talking about arguing that this is good for Ford, this is good for GM, this is good for Coca-Cola, this is good for Microsoft, this is good for Tesla, this is good for um, Facebook, whatever the giant corporation is, it's probably something that's going to be bad for the rest of us, because they're justifying it because they have to counterpose the loss to us and try to say, well, it's really good for us all in the long run because it's going to do this and that, and it actually won't. I've seen it time and time again. Definitely strongly disagree there. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. And I'm going to say strongly disagree. I think just disagree. I'm going to strongly disagree here. Because it's just saying receive public funding rather than all. Um, and this is where I get into a hard place, or between a rock and a hard place. Because at one hand, I get where the issue is that it is being, if it's being completely funded by the government. It's also could be directly controlled by the government. However, it's also important to note that government controlled media here, like when you look in the United States, you look in Britain, you look in, uh, you know, most places that are referred to as liberal democracies, whether they are or not. The United States is not a liberal democracy, it's an oligarchy. Liberal oligarchy would be a good thing to call it. Um, but the government run media tends to be much more independent and less controlled than corporate controlled media. Corporate controlled media is controlled like crazy, and it's um, been consolidated over and over again. It is definitely a bad idea. All right, and so let's see here. Next up, next page, we're on 406. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I'm going to go ahead and um, this is so dated, but I'm going to strongly agree. It's definitely based on what they're talking about. This came out 22 years ago. So this came out right after 9/11. So that's what it's talking about. Um, and a lot of that stuff stayed, but I don't think that where our liberties are being curbed, that's still being done in the name of counterterrorism anymore. I think it's just saying that it's power that the oligarchs like and they want to hold on to. But I'm going to strongly agree because definitely at that time we were going way overboard because of an unexpectedly successful terrorist attack. That we had everything in line, that we knew what was happening. There was a report on Bush's desk saying, I forgot the exact title, but it was basically hijackers plan to crash planes in the World Trade Center Pentagon. That was sitting on his desk right there. We had everything in place where we could have stopped it if we had worked a little bit better. You might have needed to work out a few mechanisms, whether Bush himself didn't take it seriously enough or if it just got there just a little bit too late and he would have read if he wasn't doing the photo op. I don't know. Bush is someone I've over the years thought as less malicious and more innocently stupid, where the real malice came from Dick Cheney, who now went from Darth Sidious to holy shit, Trump is worse. The greater evil has gotten so much more evil over time and throughout my lifetime. And the lesser evil's gotten more evil along with it. But yeah, we definitely went overboard. We were blocking people from flights for political reasons. We were doing very close surveillance of everyday Americans. It's why we have that NSA database where they know every communication. They know that you are watching my stream right now, even though they have no idea what I'm streaming about, at least not yet. Somebody could theoretically look it up. They know that you are watching this because they collect everything about American citizens now. We gave up a hell of a lot for it. I don't think any of it got turned back, but we don't do it in the name of counterterrorism anymore. Update the questions after 22 years. Political compass. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Oh, and now I am going to read this differently than what it's asking. It's asking for people to just sort of emotionally go off of it. They say that when they're set it up. And it's really asking, do you support the idea of a one party state because it's more efficient? It definitely does avoid all the argument. It doesn't, not all the arguments, but it definitely would reduce the arguments that delay progress that you see in democratic systems if you have a one party state. That is just an objective truth. Um, Even if socialist parties will have a whole lot of internal disagreement, other than, well, real socialist parties are not the democratic centralist ones, not the tanky ones, but legitimate socialist parties. We fight all the time, but it's still going to be a lot more efficient than if we also had a fight with Democrats and Republicans. It's more, much more efficient. But would I support, one party state for that efficiency? Definitely not. So I'm going to put strongly disagree. But yeah, you need to have it. I would be fine in a revolutionary context to have a short period of uh, a revolutionary government that is not exactly working democratically in the fullest, but that would have to be very short lived. If you're going on past, and I hope it wouldn't even take this long, but if you're going on more than maybe 2 years doing, being undemocratic, you are illegitimate at that point, even as a revolutionary government. You need a revolution against the revolution to restore democracy, because so much of society, it is a group struggle. It is for all of us. It is for all, whether we are experts or not, we're all contributing to the group thought process of deciding what to do. And you need everybody in there. You don't want to be excluding people. We need to be giving voting rights to immigrants a lot earlier. We need to not take it away from prisoners. Even while they're in prison, they should have the right to vote. There is no good excuse to not allow them to vote. That is not where you punish them at all. It is anti-democratic to do that. We need to have a lot more of us involved in this group collaboration we call democracy. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Strongly disagree. You'd have to be completely naive to think that. I do think it. Now that's definitely something that's a test for either an authoritarian or conservative mindset that feels, because there's a strong hold on. There's a strong correlation between conservative ideology and the authoritarian mindset. That is something that has been scientifically shown to correlate with one another. And one of the big things there is they feel security in a strong in-group state that has power. A lot of strong power to keep things in check. And so that they're really going to be the ones who are going to agree with that, if they agree with that. But a lot of that is subconscious, and you consciously put it out, they're a lot less likely to agree with it, because then you can think about it more logically rather than emotionally. But definitely, it's not just the wrongdoers need to be worried. Very much those with the surveillance powers can be the wrongdoers, and they can find things that other people are doing. And another thing to keep in mind: everybody breaks the law. Everybody does something that they're not supposed to be doing. And they do this on a regular basis. Hell, I've probably done some sort of traffic violations. I can say off the top of my head, probably in the past month, that I probably got away with speeding There we go. I probably did that today. Not by much. I'm not somebody who's going 100 miles an hour down a 50-mile-an-hour road, but I'll probably went 5 over. And actually, a lot of that's expected when they set the speed limit. They think, well, this percentage of people are going to go 5 over, and that's okay. That's still safe, and they're not going to actually bust them. And most cops don't. Um, and I don't know the exact reason, but I was had that explained to the cop that if you're going less than 15 over, he thought you were an asshole for pulling anyone over for going less than 15 over. But and I've heard of a judge who threw out a ticket that cop gave for 5 over before, saying they wouldn't hear something that low. So this is something that's taken care of, but we all do different things, and there's probably a lot of other little things that may be illegal, may be technically illegal, but not immoral. May not even be intentionally illegal. It's just that ended up being illegal, and you do it. So even you, the person who thinks you're a law-abiding citizen, you can get busted by this. They just don't like you. You did something wrong, and you don't want them surveilling and finding every little thing that happened, and then subjectively going through that. So what you fear is law and order, because there's actually two different types of legal systems that you see commonly. The first is a rule of law. That is where everybody follows the same rules. You can get off on technicalities all the time. You can get busted by technicalities too, but everything is even. You have all the rights. You have the full transparent process. That's rule of law. That is what our justice system's built on. The second is law and order. That's what you hear Trump saying all the time, and it was named after people long before him who kept saying law and order, law and order. Because what law and order is, it's what you saw in Nazi Germany. It's what you saw in the Soviet Union. It is arbitrary. That is, I don't like you, so you're going to get punished. I will find something that will punish you for. We'll kill you. We'll throw you in jail. We'll fine you, whatever it is, depending on how much I dislike you. You, I like, so you're not going to get in trouble. It's completely arbitrary. It's about those who have power rewarding those they like, punishing those they don't. And a great example of this I saw is a case from Nazi Germany, where somebody blatantly violated the law. I think it was even murder, but they blatantly violated the law, and the official ruling was that law wasn't meant for good German citizens. That was meant for other people. So by the fact that he was part of this in-group that they liked him and they didn't like his victim, he got off scot-free with, I believe it was murder. And so that is what you have law and order, and that is what you have to fear. Well, it doesn't matter if you're on the left or on the right. If you have some authoritarian presence that is about law and order, you have something to fear. Especially if you disagree with the power that's in charge at that time. So it absolutely, you are not only the wrongdoers need to be worried. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious of crimes. I'm going to softly disagree. When I first took this test, it was a strongly disagree for sure, because have been multiple studies that show that having the death penalty is the cause of a greater violent crime rate. It does not deter violent crime, it creates violent crime. However, when you see some of the atrocities that happen, it's hard for me to argue that there aren't certain things that do still deserve the death penalty. And these are things that are, I would not use it for anybody who is not in power. Um, the when you're talking about when you talk about things like murder that people get the death penalty for, it is applied so unequally. I would definitely not surprise or support bringing that back because you have so many people who are murdered for by the state for a murder they never committed, that they were completely innocent of. And you'll have people like Kamala Harris who argue that they should still be put to death because they failed to appeal timely, even though no one believes they did it. Which I don't think that was actual death row case, but it was definitely somebody who was serving time in prison that she felt should stay there, even though nobody thought they were still guilty. The jury says if we realize this, we wouldn't have thrown them in. He's definitely innocent. The judge says he's definitely innocent. Kamala Harris says, I believe he's completely innocent, but thought that he should stay in prison so it would help her goddamn numbers. Government by the numbers bullshit. I look good because I have a high conviction rate. That's bullshit. What was the question again? But that's that's part of the problem with the death penalty, that you have the false conviction. Though there are certain people that you don't have that same risk going for, that I could see that happening for. After January 6th, I would have no problem with giving the death penalty to Donald Trump. He is a traitor. He engineered what would be the best? He was the commander in chief of a war against the United States, where he also happened to be the commander in chief for the United States and stood down on that. But he was the commander in chief of the treasonous army that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. If he got the death penalty for that, I'd be fine. The Mussolini was killed for his crimes. I don't have a problem with Mussolini being killed. There is no doubt that those people did it. What they did is heinous. I'm fine with the death penalty for certain people who have immense power that do particularly atrocious things. But not for somebody who's just accused of murder, especially because it's so much harder to prove, to have that certainty with all the systemic biases in our current system, that that's the person who actually did commit the murder. So I'm going to put just that we disagree, and you understand why. Okay, so next up. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Woo! Heavy authoritarian personality being tested for here. Do you always need a hierarchy? Now, you do definitely need some sort of order in society. It needs to be democratically decided in some fashion. I definitely believe, where you have people that technically are there to be people who are above in their capacity that they are acting in, to deliver the democratic orders that were democratically decided by all, to make sure that the will of the people is carried out. And then everyone else is technically to be commanded, but that is different than what is here, because you have people who are always above law, or always above to be commanding naturally, and always not in their capacity of the role that they're fulfilling at that moment, but they're always above. And then you have people who are always below, who just need to take commands and don't command all. That definitely not. It is definitely a issue where we are all commanding and being commanded at the same time. You may have people who are conditionally in roles where they can exercise state power, but it should, I mean, put strongly disagree because it, in the concept, is trying to grab. I definitely strongly disagree. And it's important that you separate those two different ideas between people who are by their very nature to be under obeyed versus people who are in their capacity of doing a role for the people to be obeyed at that particular moment in time. We are not Richard Wolf here. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. And I am going to get some huge authoritarian points. I know this is considered authoritarian. If you say agree, I strongly agree. And the reason why is I think art has to have a meaning of some sort. When you make art, it is something that it's an expression. It's something that you are actually showing with intent. You are communicating between two people. And abstract art, by its definition, does not do that. It is, well, what does this make you feel? You weren't feeling anything. I want to feel your goddamn emotions. I want to see what you're telling me. But if you're not saying anything, that's not art. That's when you just have elephants flinging paint and you sell it for a bunch. When you tape a banana to the wall and that's sold for $100,000, it is effing ridiculous. You do not want to. It is, from what I see, it's a grift on the bourgeoisie themselves. You have these people at the very top and they want to feel cultured and they need to seem like they're above it all and they get everything. They don't like abstract art any more than the rest of us, but they buy it and pretend that they know what it means. And oh, this is profound because they because they want to reflect the idea that they do understand when they don't. And that is not at all I mean it's a what do you call it? A racket. It is a racket that you run on the bourgeoisie, and I'm fine with the artists themselves running that racket on the bourgeoisie, but I'm not going to help them and pretend that abstract art is of any worth. You want to see good art. All right, and let's just pull this up. We visit and look at the actual image, and we got a nice big image here. Now, here you see actual art. Here, there is meaning in all of this. You have, the no, I don't really care that Lenin's there, but you have Lenin. He has these oppressed people of the world looking to him and caring there. You have the scientists working in the socialist revolution. They've cut off the head of fascism and Nazism. Over here, you have people, people united at the top right. You have, it's supposed to be the biological sciences. So you have all these images of different plants, each one different, growing that you're learning. You have the microcosm counterposed with the macrocosm in the cross thing in the middle. It sort of looks like fairy wings in a way, but You have that's deeply symbolic. The macrocosm, microcosm, that which is above and that which is below. You got the goddamn hermetic teachings in this. I didn't quite realize that before. Fighting against the horrible wars of fascism, decadent society on the left side there, the policemen beating the protesters, um, and you have seems is on that side, so it seems to be really people being mesmerized by television in that case, or it could be a TV screen, whatever it happens to be. But you have these juxtaposed sides. There is deep meaning to this. Diego Rivera had a message and symbolic, and you have to think about it. That's great, but it had a meaning. He had the meaning. He didn't expect you to just come up with your own. He didn't say, well, I threw some stuff together. You do the work of coming up with a meaning. He had the meaning. He expressed it into a great work of art, and he did other stuff. I love the counterpositions of what you see at the DIA, Detroit Institute of Arts. You have a whole room where all you have is atrium and 2 floors of Diego Rivera mural he painted there. That I sat there and I just pointed out, I see this connection, that connection. That is art. It has meaning. Um, and it's not necessarily clear and apparent. And if somebody's just painting a portrait of somebody and put nothing into it, I also disagree that that's art. That is just artisanry. You have great skill at what you do, but there's no meaning. And if you're just painting a portrait of me and I'm just like, you're not doing something to put some sort of symbolism there, as far as I'm concerned, that's not art either. You have to have that meaning for it. And so let me go back here. Yeah, I strongly agree that it should not be considered art at all. And I have a very narrow definition of art. The art has to make you think, and it has to have the damn meaning that you intend to convey to me when I'm looking at that art. Put some connections together, communicate with that symbolism. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I'm going to say strongly disagree. That is not the main point of criminal justice. You want to rehabilitate people, you want to return them to being productive members of society, not turn them into somebody you hate. And most crime that is committed is not, people who are doing murder or who are doing rape or whatnot, or even necessarily stealing from, people's homes. You have a lot of crime is things like I possess drugs, I was intending to sell drugs, which oftentimes just you have too much drugs, they decide, oh, that's proof that you intended to. Very much against the rule of law. I don't know how that was ever gone through, but either way, it definitely is about rehabilitating people, getting people that they should be going back, or at least that's what it should be. It's not the way the criminal justice system is done now. You are much more likely to turn somebody who's falsely convicted, who is not a criminal, into a criminal, a career lifetime criminal, than you are to rehabilitate somebody. But that's because we just do criminal justice wrong, and we focus on punishment, or yeah, we used to focus on punishment. Now we focus on profit, which is somehow even worse because it's very punitive, but that's not the intent. Okay. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. No, I'll give it a strongly agree even, because yeah, there are some legitimate sociopaths out there, and it is a waste of time to rehabilitate them, because an actual sociopath lacks the evolution, what we evolved as humans to be social creatures, that we have this innate sense of morality of right and wrong that is missing in a sociopath. Sociopath sees us all as tools, all as objects to be used, and um, try to avoid the ones of us that can cause them harm. Um, they're not members of society. They are individuals who exist where they cannot conceive of society. And so I do think that there are some who cannot be rehabilitated. There are some that just need to stay in prison for the rest of their lives. I don't think it's common, especially not. I'm not gonna say especially, but it. I don't think it's common. I think that the vast majority of prisoners can be rehabilitated. They are not sociopaths, even if they do have some stuff from the dark triad. They're not actual sociopaths, but sociopaths do exist, and you cannot rehabilitate a sociopath. That is something that is missing from them, not something that you can be learned. And I think it probably epigenetic was what I was thinking before, but I don't think it's genetic. Or I do think it's genetic. I need to look into that to make sure I do understand that, because I am not 100% sure. But my understanding right now is it is genetic. It's a flaw. They do well amongst people who cooperate and treat them as if they are members of society, because we can't tell they're sociopaths. They're really good. A good sociopath is so lovable and likable because you can't tell. They are good at manipulating people. But if you actually have one, they cannot be rehabilitated. You can't give them that back. Even if it's something that they lost over time from trauma, you can't give them that back. It's not possible. Maybe that's where eugenics can be used. Give the genes to make people who are diagnosable sociopaths actual pro-social emotions. But and then you don't have to keep them in prison for the rest of their lives. So it's good for all of us in that case. So I just came out for some minor eugenics. Okay. Now next up, the actually give me another moment. Okay. All right, I am back, and just in case anyone actually is watching and is wondering, I cannot see you. I'm just looking at what you can see on the screen right now. If you know how I can see that, so I don't know if there's people who are typing somewhere. I have no idea that you're doing it. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. So that's basically like a STEM bias. Uh, People who produce material things are more important than people who do immaterial things. Um, and so this is a tough question for me. Um, Now, on one hand, you could say that the people who, and I don't like saying the business person, manufacturer, but let's say it's the people who are working there, the people who are providing actual, creating actual things, who are growing actual crops, who are mining actual minerals. Those people, not the people who are exploiting their labor, because fuck them. But the people at the bottom, are they more important than the writer or the artist? And I don't know if that's even really I feel like that's the juxtaposition that has to be the intent of the question. Now, now they are more fundamental. You need them first, but once you have enough, I'm not sure. I don't think that they are more important than the writer or the artist, because even those immaterial things have immense value, and it's something that is important to us as a species. I believe this is. I have not read a whole bunch on this. I might be wrong here, but I do believe that there is an actual genetic basis where we evolved to need the meaning of art of some sort, whether it's writing, painting, acting, songs, sculptures, uh, video game design, any of these things. They're all things that we do need as a society, but they're not as immediate needs as I need my belly full. I need a roof over my head. And it goes back to Marx. Yeah, the natural man needs, which is those material things, and you have the species man things, which are the immaterial things. And then that later got improved and was put in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Whether Maslow is actually looking at Marx or not, I'm not sure, but it's the same damn idea. I'll tell you that. Just a little bit more worked out. So I am going to go with disagree, but not strongly disagree, because there is, or should I say agree, but not strongly agree. Let me say agree, but not strongly agree. I think that best reflects my idea that it is more fundamental for the person who is doing the physical thing that meets those uh, natural man needs, but less. But it's important at the point that you have sufficient amount for the natural man needs, the species man needs, those higher needs, those immaterial needs become just as important at that point. It can often lead to us being able to be more effective creating fulfilling the material needs in the future. All right. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Strongly disagree. You're I do not believe that gender is a social construct, but gender roles sure as hell are. It is at certain times probably more beneficial for most mothers to be um, in that role for a limited period of time, and that's while they are actively pregnant and might need to have the flexibility of being at home. But after that, it could very well flip, where somebody who the other parent is able to be there, and a woman has no inherent requirement to be in to be a homemaker. That is arbitrary. If you are in a relationship, it should be because you love the other person for who they are, not because they fulfill this particular role. We are not in uh, we're not in the years BCE where this is a economic transaction where you're trying to make sure, well, this will give enough to my family, and I'll give you your wife who will produce strong children for you, and blah blah blah. No, it's not an economic transaction anymore, and it shouldn't be. It should be getting to that deeper immaterial love. And so that's the first thing. And if you have a woman and a man, which is presupposed in here, it's not assuming that you have two men or two women, or even you can have a trans man and a trans woman where it would actually be switched, you know, during the period I was talking about. But um, you split things up as works for you between the two of you. If a woman wants to be a homemaker, there's no reason she can't. If the man also wants to be a homemaker in that heterosexual cisgender relationship, then they're gonna have to split those duties up and each go get part of it. If neither one wants to be a homemaker, depending on the situation, one of them may have to give in. It doesn't have to be the woman who does that, but um, they might be where neither of them has to be a homemaker. It's not something that's required. Um, Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warnings of climate science that growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. And this is okay. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward that we should. Okay, saying specific, we should heed the warning. So it is saying that the survival of the climate is more important than short term economic growth. Strongly agree. And usually we strongly agree, but I had to work out exactly what I was asking at this point. But yeah, it if humanity is unable to live as good of a life or unable to live at all, that is a much bigger issue than some short-term economic gains. It's very sociopathic for a society to choose economic growth since then. In the 22 years since then, we have repeatedly chosen economic growth. Chosen not even necessarily economic growth, it could just be straight up profit that somebody sits on. We chose to give to the few and put the needs of all at risk because people at the top, they think they're going to survive. They got these things here to survive it. And it take me too long to find the article that I could show you. CNBC, it was originally on Medium. CNBC republished it, which gave it legitimacy that wasn't just some random person making stuff up. Uh, where this is very much a concern of some of the richest people that he spoke to. But how did I end up with Google anyways? Luxury bunkers. And let's see here. Let's look at here. This is probably a site trying to sell them. Yep. Life protection, wealth protection, leisure and entertainment, engineering and technology. And you see how these are made of. These are bunkers. These are built into mountains where they don't tell the general public where they are. Here is a $8 million one, a $60 million one, $15 million one. You can custom design. They'll probably cost you a lot more. How many of us have $8 million between everybody we know, even everybody that you actually know that knows you back? I doubt many people could say that you know enough people that you could afford one of these, but that's what they plan to hide away in. That's why they could play wanton with the economy. Hey, if you have to live in a luxury bunker, it might not be the greatest thing, but I have a whole lot more power with the people who survive. Because in that article, one of the big concerns were, how do I make sure that everyone's listening to me when things happen? That I have control over the food, so I have the power. That is, once wealth gets to a certain point, it's not just a game of who can have the most. It's a matter of power, because that is something you can spend on getting people to be loyal. even do horrific things. You can convince those kids to murder sick children. Hey, if you know, even now, if you offer like $3 million, you can find people who will kill sick children for that. You are in a situation where not everyone's going, most people aren't going to survive. Some people think they're going to survive locked away in this luxury bunker. You are going to find that um, that they will definitely you're going to find people are willing to do that, where it's better you than me. And so that is what this is about, and it is sick. And quite frankly, I think people buying those $8 million bunkers might be the people being controlled at the end, because those probably don't come with a way of maintaining a long supply of food. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Very conservative sentiment that you need. Being mature means you just make peace with the way things are. And I think that is, while there are so pro-social values put forward in it, it also can be very anti-social if the establishment isn't pro-social itself. Right now, like in America, it's not a pro-social um, establishment there. It's a very antisocial one that is willing to allow tons of people to die, suffer, live in squalor, so that a few handful of people can live at the top. Is willing to, I mean, it is very, very antisocial. So making peace with that is an aspect of immaturity, if you ask me. Because part of maturity is saying, I am going to stand up for what is right and make sure people are taken care of. People I may not even know. And so if you make peace with the establishment in a situation like this, that is immature, if you ask me. So I'm going to say strongly disagree. I think people are getting a pretty good idea of where I am, and we got 2 more pages left. I've had you here in a while. I don't know if I'm going to go through another test on the same stream. All right. Astrology accurately explains many things. And this is, look into superstition is, I think it's going to consider it fairly conservative, which will probably tie to authoritarianism. But I am going to agree. I am not an atheist. I do definitely believe in deities, not traditional ones, or traditional in America at least. Here is one. I got a little thing of Jehuta. Couldn't find a big one. I did get some other big ones of one. This is the big deity to me that is not Ra, which is the universal one, of which all these others are aspects thereof. Let me grab that. This is just fun learning to know me, huh? Ah. All right. So we have Ma'at, the embodiment of justice and morality, what is right and versus what is wrong. This is the principle upon which your heart is weighed on whether it perfectly matches the principles of Ma'at. Not too heavy, not too light. And so I definitely made sure I had a statuette of her. That's a very important deity in my life. It is. I am a panentheist. of sorts. I believe all exists within the mind of God, that God is Ra, and all these other deities are just, as things that naturally exist, that are forces, whether or not there is any sort of personification of it, or to what extent, I'm not 100% sure. But that they mainly are represented as that for the purposes of magic, where magic is you using your mind to shape reality. Because ultimately, like I said, we all exist within the mind of God. This is all thought up. The universe is fundamentally of mental substance. That is my religious beliefs. Not all of them, but enough to explain this. Part of my religious tradition is definitely astrology. I do not believe that astrology is something that is deterministic, but I do think that whether or not it involves the actual stars or whatnot, so I'm not worried about if it's shifted over time. It represents influences that help guide us and makes it more likely that we're going to fall into certain buckets of what we're going to be like, how we're going to act, and so on. And you have some big, you like look in your paper and you see this is what cancers need to look for. I disregard that. That's way too inspecific, too generalized to have any meaning whatsoever. But I do think that you do have some validity to astrology. Um, and I also understand astrology. Um, One of the three things that the thrice great Hermes Trismegistus had to master to be thrice great includes several divination tools as well as just astrology. So I'm going to say agree. I am a little bit of that superstitious that they're talking about. I do believe in the things shaping the world that aren't more than the natural world. But I do think it's ultimately up to us because uh, one thing that you also keep in mind with that, I said everything is in the mind of God. Not only is everything in the mind of God because we are part of God's mind, and that includes me, that includes you, that includes this lighter, that includes the chair I'm sitting on, includes the photons that are shooting from your computer screen, or you can watch this on your TV, I guess, too, but shooting from the screen to your eyes. Those are all part of God. Piece of dog shit sitting in your backyard is also part of God. But it's all there, and so we are part of that divine being. As above, so below, as is with that, so we are with society. Um, and so we are part of that struggle. But this is asking, you can judge me how it wants, but yes, I am somebody who thinks astrology is able to explain some things. And I do have a great book that I did run my own little test. I didn't do a whole bunch because I don't have stuff pre-typed out where I could share it, but I took the entries because it splits everything up into 48 weeks. Of course, not all of them are exactly 7 days, but it broke up each sign into 3 stages and a cusp with the bordering ones. And I've tried with people where I read off the wrong one to them first, and then I read off the right one to them, and they only one person agreed with the wrong one as representing them. Most of them said they thought it did not match what they were seeing. But then they did think when I read off the right one that it matched. Secret history of relation or secret language of Relationships was the book I read it from. And so I could say that my own little small insubstantial test of it did show where people were at least relating to what they thought their sun sign said they matched with. So I'm not going in completely blind. It's not blind faith. I believe in reasoned faith. It's more likely than the alternative, but it's not something that I can be certain of. And a lot of people are gonna have problems with that, especially on the left. But hell, that's where I am, and I'm not changing. Okay, so next one. You cannot be moral without being religious. And I'm going to strongly disagree. I discussed that earlier. People do not get their morals from their religion. I have my religion not because I think it gives me any good morals, not because I think it's going to improve my chances of where I'm going to be in an afterlife. That's going to happen one way or another. That's about who I am and how, not even just how I act, who I am that drives my actions. I believe it's about who you are on the inside that you're able to, you know, change yourself into over the course of life. That alchemy, that is what defines whether you're good to go. If you do bad things on accident or good things on accident, that doesn't matter. It's about that drive, that intent. But I don't think my religion helps me other than give me peace of mind that this makes sense to me. And so that's where my religious thing, that's where it ends for me. But you do not get your morals from that. I've know other people who consider themselves Hermetists. I don't know them, but I've heard of them. Yeah, goddamn fascist movements. I do not consider those people on my equal at all morally. They do not get their morals from the same place I got my morals from. Neither of us got it from the religion. Neither of us got it there. We got ours internally. Possibly you could have a spiritual connection that helps shape those, possibly, but it's not coming from the religion. What you believe or don't believe makes no difference. I have no better chance of getting in than an atheist or somebody who believes something wrong. I can imagine you could potentially have specific religions that are necessarily bad. Maybe Christian Science, you could say that about, because it leads people to cause harm to others, namely their children. That they won't let their children get medical attention, then their children die. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people in that case. I don't believe the Christian Scientists are bad people, but they do real harm. So I could see where, maybe you could say Christian Science is a bad religion that may be bad, but the morality itself, you get that from other sources, and you plaster it onto your religion. We saw that with Christians that's when that came up, where they're just plastering things that were in direct contradiction of the Bible and accrediting it to the Bible. So absolutely no, that's not where you get your morals from. So not only can you be moral without being religious, those two things have nothing to do with one another. Which is also why the new atheists need to fuck off, because no, Christianity does not make people bad. Islam doesn't make people bad, doesn't cause these wars. The wars happened for other reasons that would have happened anyways in the absence of the religion. The religion was just the easiest thing to plaster that on. They would have created something else. So take that, Richard Dawkins, with your bullshit. And by the way, I'm going to add in, because I am streaming and I can just go off topic. I'm going to point out the hypocrisy that Dawkins thinks, is going to condemn Muhammad of being a pedophile based on the lowest ever given estimate for the age of Aisha when he married her. It's written in there that um, she was a widow. Somebody else had married her before. So you know that it's not outside the realm of society for this marriage to have happened. This is normal. And there's disagreement about exactly how old she was. Pubescence seems to be all the other ones, but this one that is held by people who most likely believe that, use that estimate because they want to justify their own child marriages rather than that having any basis in reality. Um, some of them have her in her early 20s or whatnot, but he's willing to condemn Muhammad for supposedly um, being in a socially allowable relationship with someone who he believes was too young. Probably wasn't anywhere near that young, at least. Maybe it's like 13, 14, and then we get um, that's a different story than both of them, but just not saying that is right, but it's not something that's as bad as the 9-year-old thing, especially given that they would have been considered adults, so less likely to be feeling they had to agree. But then the whole patriarchy thing is going to throw that off, anyways. So I don't even fucking know what's going on with that. But, anyways, Dawkins is definitely attacking Muhammad for that. That was socially acceptable, while at the same time dismissing his own molestation by a teacher while he was around 9 years old as being no big deal because those were the times. In other words, it was considered socially acceptable to molest little boys in primary school when he was going there. That is the level of his hatred that he's willing to forgive what has happened to him himself while condemning something that was much less malicious and also socially acceptable in others. So Dawkins is a goddamn hateful bigot hypocrite. Okay, so next up, charity is better than social security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. It's not capitalized, so I'm a bit surprised, but it's basically pointing the same thing one way or another. And the answer is strongly disagree. The facts around that. People give a lot less. Most of what people give to charity, super rich, it's things that we grant charitable status to, but ultimately help them themselves. They're the beneficiaries of that charity. Be things like, ooh, let's give to this group and they're going to help um, long term result in lower taxation or less worker regulations, things like that. Um, and when you're relying upon people willing to say, okay, I am certain I have enough to give out, and here's enough, and you're doing that, that's a bad idea. And mind you, that when the government does it, their overhead cost is almost always better than the best charity. Charities have very high overhead costs generally. You're paying staff salaries, you're paying for advertisements to try to get money. You get a lot more bang for your buck out of society doing it than relying upon personal charity. But they love personal charity, the rich, because it's all voluntary on their part. Specifically, that they only give how much they want to give rather than having to give their fair share to society. And it wouldn't even be their fair share, it'd be a fraction of their fair share because they stole everything they got. But next up, some people are naturally unlucky. And now the basis of this is whether people are just if it's not the system that's screwing people over, but just bad luck is what it's going, and that's how I'm reading and interpreting it. That is, in essence, even though it's not directly at the question, and you can judge for yourself whether you think I'm being fair with that. So I'm going to say strongly disagree, but ultimately there are people who are naturally unlucky, and it doesn't even have to be spiritual things; just could be random numbers, even. Um, people are unlucky if they're born with disabilities. People are unlucky if they happen to be the person gets struck by lightning. Um, you have Will Wheaton, who is notoriously bad with rolling die. Die. I almost said dice. It should be die. Okay. He gets natural ones and all that type of stuff constantly. Rolls a lot lower than people should. And so I can't debunk Will Wheaton. So I'm going to have to go with there are people who are naturally unlucky, but I don't think that's what the question is really asking. And so I'm going to answer what the question is really asking, which is if people we can dismiss the misfortune of others as merely being unlucky as opposed to um, being being the victim of the system. Okay, it is important that my child's school instills religious values. Strongly disagree. I think it's very important that my child's school, if I had a child, does not instill religious values, even my own. In fact, I only want to instill. If I had a child, maybe I will one day. I'm probably have to adopt, but I would definitely not instill religious values in that child. I want that child deciding for themselves. I was not raised in my religion, and um, I definitely feel like I believe more. I'm able to believe more because I don't have. Um, I wasn't filtered into it. I have no. Uh, I wasn't raised to be attached to those beliefs. And I feel like it's a gift that I found it, and I could say that I truly believe this. That it's not a matter of um, that I was taught to believe this, and I want that same thing for my child. If my child believes there is nothing, if my child believes a completely different religion, so be it. I want that to be their own journey. I think it's useful to think that out for yourself, and not just go with what you believe or just default to atheists. And there's some atheists who don't do that, but there's a hell of a lot of the most vocal ones, the anti-theists specifically. Just um, it's either I just not Christian, so therefore I'm atheist. I haven't considered anything else, or I'm just not of an Abrahamic religion, and I haven't considered anything else. They have no conception of other religions, and you blow their minds when you describe the stuff that I believe in. And I've even had some of them like, "No, you're an atheist. You don't believe in God, then." And how even Richard Dawkins described people like me as sexy atheists. We're not really theists, but I definitely believe. So I think that Dawkins is full of shit. And I think he's full of shit on pretty much everything. The only I believe he set his entire field back decades, and the only useful thing he has ever given to society is the concept of memes, which we have ruined by thinking that what you see on the internet is the sole meaning of memes. Memes are just ideas, they don't have to be pictures. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Strongly disagree. I am very sex positive. I have had sex many, many times outside of marriage. I have in I've been part of an orgy before, unmarried. No problem there. Sex outside of marriage is perfectly fine. You need to make sure that you know what you're doing if you do have a child. In such a case, you want to be careful that you're not getting diseases that you're suffering from and then spreading. If you get pregnant, for example, you should probably have a good idea. Do you want to keep that child or do you not want to keep that child? Do you want to give birth to that child, put it up for adoption, or do you want an abortion? Have that figured out beforehand. It would be immoral to have the child and not be able to take care of the child or abuse the child because you're neglecting them or something like that. Because you'd rather do that than abort them. That would be immoral. But the sex itself isn't immoral at all. And one of the fun things I found out is that um, my religion, which I connect, Hermetism is supposed to be the teachings of ancient Egypt. I see them in there. I consider them interchangeable. Separate from Hermeticism, which is just people taking Hermetism and its philosophies and applying it to other religions. But Hermetism, I consider the same thing as ancient Egypt, just translates to the Greeks, understood it easier. And ancient Egypt, it was perfectly fine to have sex with whoever the hell you wanted before you got married. But once you got married, then that's monogamy. It was a great sin to violate the marriage bed. But before you get married, you're free. You do whatever you want. And I am perfectly fine with that. And I would take the idea of marriage just as seriously, where everything, if there's anything outside, needs to be fully agreed between both, all parties involved. And let's see here. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. And that feels old. I don't think there's many people who would disagree with it these days. Should not be excluded. So that strongly agree. You should be able to do that. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. I am going to strongly agree. I am definitely sex positive. I am perfectly fine with pornography. I'm fine with prostitution as long as it's not trafficked. Even pornography can be trafficked. As long as everything's not trafficked, yes, consenting adults definitely good. Non-consenting adults not good. Consenting children can't consent. That includes teens or whatnot. They cannot consent, or at least it's not meaningful consent. They can expressly consent, but it doesn't count is the issue. They're not capable of not consenting properly. Therefore, it's not valid. So that's not good. But between consenting adults, yeah. And I've spoken to people who have been involved with pornography, and one person told me that there's only one thing that they had a problem with, that they thought was wrong about the business, and that was a very particular site which was awfully brutal in the way they did it, and it causes the problem that once you're in it and if you want to back out, you don't get paid. And that particular site was particularly brutal, and they didn't feel safe backing out because they wouldn't have the money if they did, but it went way too far with what they were doing. And that one where, you talk about literally choking people to the point that they vomit with the gagging type stuff. And so, the vast majority of stuff you're perfectly fine with. You may need to worry about some of the violent stuff. I have heard that there have been studies where not your regular porn by any means, but some of the violent porn does increase the chances of rape. The people who consume are more likely to commit rape afterwards. But that is the very violent stuff, not your, hey, I consent type thing. We're talking about, um, you know, rape play on video. It's a little bit different. I doubt rape play causes that, but I could see how watching it can mess somebody up where they are more desensitized to the idea of forcing themselves on somebody. Next up, what goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Now that's is going after sexual stuff, and for that part, yeah, it's no business of the state what happens between consenting adults. Um, Now there are things that could be happening in bedrooms that between consenting adults that can be issues of the state. They could be um, they could be in a bedroom plotting to overthrow the government. Now that's something that between consenting adults, but maybe is of the state's concern. Uh, but but that's not what the question's getting at. The question's getting at whether you can, uh, whether you should outlaw specific sexual stuff between consenting adults. And the answer is no. If they agree to it, that's fine. I have seen, or don't think I saw it. I've heard about it for sure. I don't think the person actually showed it to me. Where apparently somebody had consensually BDSM with a point with a drill where it actually drilled through their breast, which is incredibly unsafe. I don't know why anyone would take it to anywhere near that level. But that is something I would say probably still within consenting adults if it can be shown that it's not going to kill people if it's done correctly somehow, which I'm doubtful. But the principal part of it is if no one's going to die because of negligence in consenting adults, perfectly fine, even if it's really, really fucked up. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Strongly disagree. People very much feel naturally homosexual. There's nothing wrong with feeling naturally homosexual. There have been studies showing what genes cause homosexuality, that later births are more likely to be homosexual because the mother's immune system is more likely to kill children, but gay boys somehow are less likely to be killed by the immune system when they're first growing. So that's an act of God trying to kill little boys as fetuses. So you think abortion is wrong? I gotta tell you, natural system supposed to be put in there by God. It's evolution, but a lot of you think it's God are in there saying that, hey, we've had too many boys, we're gonna have more girls. God is aborting these children. Ooh. They're not actually children yet. They're little things smaller than my fingertip. Now, last question. We're finally on that. And I think I've streamed this a lot longer. I spent a lot more time explaining these questions than I thought. And so maybe I'll do more the other day. I'll go into more after I go through here. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Strongly disagree. People need to be open. For all I care, leave information about your sex lives in my comment section. I don't care. I don't think YouTube is going to hold it against me if you do. If they do, I might have a problem at that point. But if they don't, I don't care. You can be open as you want. People need to be more open about sex. One of the biggest problems that you have is people are too non open, because that makes it more likely that you're going to have unwanted pregnancies. You're more likely to have abusive relationships. You're more likely to have, children have no sex education whatsoever. They're more likely to be victims of child rape. You want to educate your child so they know that it's wrong when something's happening, because otherwise they may not know, and then somebody gets away with horrible things. So there's no problem with openness about sex. I don't think that's much of a social issue these days as it was 22 years ago. You really had a big, finger shaking. Sex has gone too far back then. I think sexual openness, even amongst evangelical Christians, has become less. It's become more open with them, even, I feel, because I don't think I've heard them complain about it anywhere near as much as I used to when I was a teenager. All right, so let's see where I stand. I'm going to be somewhere in that lower left quarter, pretty far. I think I'm going to show up almost all the way to the left, about twice that distance above the lowest line. And you get that's where I normally fall. And that is not me. I've seen Mr. Beat fell for that and thought that was him. But that's just telling you the axes and how this works. You can take it yourself if you want to find that out. You find where places are. And ultimately, I'm going to also tell you, because I knew what I was going to test. I disagree with the idea of North Korea and China being there. They're authoritarian for sure, but I think they're on the right, especially China. Maybe not especially China, but North Korea is a goddamn feudal hereditary monarchy, with possible deification of the Kim dynasty. It is basically all just the right now. Kim Il Sung, is it, or is that the first one? Because Kim Jong Il was the son, then you have the third. Whichever the current one is, it's very similar to Kim Il Sung. So either he is Kim Il Sung or his grandfather was, but he has a very similar sounding name. And I can't keep them straight, but anyways, it's his personal property, the entire goddamn country. That is not at all socialism, it's all nationalism. They left any semblance of socialism behind when the grandfather died. He at least was pretending to be Marxist Leninist, but they don't even go into it. They have the Juche thing now, which has nothing to do with even Marxism Leninism. It is just pure Korean nationalism is all it is. And it's nasty fascist like stuff. Yeah, when you see tankies and they're trying to defend North Korea, they are just racist against Asians because they don't think that they deserve the real thing, that they deserve the worst thing, as long as it calls itself socialist. That's good enough for the Asians. Yeah, fuck them. China, very much a capitalist nation. It's not a feudal monarchy, but it is a dictatorship. I haven't thought clearly lately whether it crosses the lines in the fascism or not. It definitely has. Fascism is defined by or at least definition I use. All the definitions are just breaking down this into more things that are subsets of these three things. It's the conjunction of these three counter enlightenment is three counter enlightenment reactionary movements: nationalism, elitism, and irrationalism. Now, you definitely have that with Trumpers. They got all three. Russia at this point crossed with irrationalism. I'm sure they got all three. You find that with a lot of the Eastern European movement, political governments right now. Saddam Hussein was historically that. Of course, Mussolini, Hitler. I don't believe Franco crossed all the way in. He was reactionary, but not quite fascist. You have a whole lot, but China, they definitely are nationalists. There's strong Han nationalism. The Han have been imperialist for millennia. They may have been the victims of colonialism in the 1800s, but they've since become imperialists again. They're doing imperialism in China. They're doing imperialism in Asia within borders that are recognized as theirs. But what they're doing with the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, that's colonialism and imperialism. They are a capitalist imperialist state for sure. Han nationalism drives them. They are elitists. They definitely have the strict hierarchy. It's capitalist at this point. They abandoned any attempt at socialism, which wasn't even a proper attempt at socialism. From what I heard, they left the last bit because Russia abandoned them. Soviet Union rather abandoned them in the 70s, and they just went full out capitalist. And there's nothing socialist about them at all. Both of those belong on the far right there, or at least on the right, not even if not the far right. But because they pretend at being socialist, I guess the creators of this graph put them on the left, and that ain't right. Here I am, and I'm actually 3 times authoritarian as to the right. But I'm still safely deeply nested into that green square. Economic left right minus 8.75. Social libertarian / authoritarian minus 6.82. So I am definitely there, and I think I'm technically a little bit lower here, but you know why it marked me up. I told you I don't like abstract art, and I don't think that just plain portraits are art either. So that's the other side of it. Okay, and so my personal certificate, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why I would actually pay for that. And so we are done with that. And let me figure out how to get that off so you're not looking at the infinite regression. And can I just turn? All right, hit it. Oh, here I am. I'm right up front in center. And so I think I'm going to call that. But one thing I know I plan on having up, I think I just need to get them to create some sort of account so that I can do the invite thing. My adoptive sister, we're not biologically related at all. Adoption ain't even legal. We met each other in 30s. We consider ourselves sisters. Is a Black Jewish woman who we wanted to have a discussion on here about the current Israeli actions during the 6-Day War. Because 6-Day War is still going on. It's at almost day 21,000 at this point. It never ended. It's really ridiculous. It's propaganda that they call it the 6-Day War. While most parties surrendered in that period, the Palestinians still not signed the peace treaty. They want the right to return. Israel won't give that. There's never been a peace treaty signed. That's why Israel, what Israel does there so often is a war crime. It would not be a war crime if they weren't at war. Still be a crime against humanity, but it wouldn't be a war crime. Um, but she is against, the genocide against Palestine. Um, has had a lot of backlash from the Jewish community here in America. In Israel, they are not so much pro genocide there right now. In America, we have been so propagandized that we are full, absolutely stocked full of, um, we are stocked full of propaganda, and so yeah, everyone is all for the genocide, thinking that's protecting the Jews. It's not protecting the Jews; it's putting them in more danger. It is definitely killing the Palestinians. But she's definitely gotten a whole lot of hate from American Jews over here because she doesn't support that. And so we're going to have a full discussion. I'll let her tell you all about it if we can get that working properly. And I think I can. We got the first stream done. Let me see how this goes. Oh, I can stop sharing. And so I think it just shows me without showing. I don't know what the difference is at this point. I can rewatch and find out what happened. But thank you for joining me for my first stream. I plan on using this for a few things. I don't know how often I will actually stream. And I definitely don't see whether people are watching this or not in either place. Nor do I see what they're saying if they are. I will look back and check and see if I can find that when this actually uploads. But thank you for watching. If you watch, I may not have anyone watching yet. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. And if you have suggestions for how I can find that all out, make sure you let me know. Ooh, wait, here's the thing that says chat. There are two people. No, there's one person. Okay, sorry for bothering you. I want to offer promotion of your channel, viewers, followers, views, chatbots, etc. The price is lower than any competitor. Okay, this is an advertisement. And I do not know enough to be spending more money. I spent so much money on this whole endeavor already without knowing how things work. So I am going to say no for right now. Sarcastic Vegel. Vegel, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I do not know what I need or not for sure, and I don't want to just start spending money with no money coming in. But thank you if you are an actual person and not just a bot. I may not have anyone watching, might just be a bot. But one day people will watch. But thank you just the same.